Chatty Wednesdays with me.
Hi, I'm back with another Assumptions About Buskers video, part 2, and if you haven't seen part 1, you can find a link to it in the description. Yes, I'm rocking my own merch. This is my busker merch. A little Ferris wheel here, not any Ferris wheel in particular for copyright reasons, and Big Ben, and little me in the middle with my guitar case, doing a little busking by the riverside. You can find these on my website in black and white in a variety of sizes, so have a little look. Website is in the description. Let's go with some of your assumptions. I'm going to start with Alexandra Hill, who actually suggested this Assumptions About Buskers video. She left a couple of points, and her fourth point was buskers judge the listener on how much money they give. I know this sounds like such a lie, but I really don't. I have a sort of rule that I try not to look at how much they're tipping for a couple of reasons. First of all, I think it takes my engagement away from the crowd who are watching, hopefully. So I try and just keep my eyes at this level, looking at above. And also, I don't like to look down at somebody because I don't want them to think that I'm looking at how much they're giving. It almost feels like you're looking at their PIN number a little bit. And also, I think it looks like I think that they're stealing. I don't know if that's just something that I think. I don't want them to think that I'm suspicious of them because obviously they're coming near my money, and I want there to be an element of trust. And I'm like, I know that you're not going to steal anything from my case. That said, the only time I look at what somebody's putting in is if I'm suspicious of them. Unfortunately, I have had a couple of people take money out of my case. I say particular types of people, homeless people. Unfortunately, they do sometimes steal from you. Like, they're in desperate situations, and I do understand in a way, but I'd rather they didn't steal from me, so I do have to keep a little bit of an eye. That said, sometimes homeless people do tip me. I feel quite bad actually taking their money, and I try and discourage them from because they need it more than me, but sometimes they've enjoyed the music and they want to make their contribution. So, and in that sense, I always try not to judge people for how much they give, because I don't know how much that money means to them, you know, because obviously to a homeless person a pound is a lot, whereas to somebody who's a millionaire a pound is not very much. You never really know what someone's going through, so you can't really make a judgment on that. Phil says, I assume it eventually becomes like most jobs where the days are somewhat repetitive and mundane, except some moments you'll realise you're doing a really unique and interesting thing. Yeah, 100%. This is so true, like, because I made busking my job in like 2012, so I've been doing this quite a while, and I've been really lucky up until the pandemic that I was always playing in the same spot. So there did become a sort of routine that I got up at the same time, I left the house at the same time, I arrived at work at the same time. The reason I've been able to make it my job is because it is quite steady. It becomes quite predictable in a way. And yeah, you have your moments where you're just like, wow, this is such an insane thing to be doing with my life. But other moments, it is just like another day at the office. Leo says, growing up and living in Iowa, I had no exposure to buskers. On my third trip to London, I walked along the South Bank from London Bridge to the London Eye and saw several buskers along the way. If I stopped to listen, I tossed a coin in their case, though never listened to more than one song. Then I arrived at the London Eye to hear Charlotte Campbell singing a Beatles song and Streets of London. The music held my attention, as did a little girl offering her a red balloon for a tip. Yeah, I remember this day. There was this family with a little girl, and she came up she'd already put money in my case, I think, so I think she understood that I was playing music and it was in some sort of exchange. So she came up, she tried to give me her balloon. She had a little red balloon and she wanted me to have it, but I was like, no, you keep that, that's yours. Such a sweet thing. And I guess it goes back a little bit to what I was saying at the beginning about how you can't really judge people for what they give, because like to this little girl, remember you're a kid and a balloon, imagine you had a balloon. Like that's huge. That's like all her worldly possessions. Things like that make me so happy. I think busking's really helped me understand the sort of value of things and what things mean to people. And yeah, the fact that this little girl wanted me to have her balloon, I knew that it meant a lot to her, my music, so it was really lovely. Leo lives in Iowa, but he comes to London quite often now to see me and lots of the other buskers, so that's really cool. He mentions Lucy May Walker as well, and he also says this, which is really good. A successful busker has to be more than a talented singer. They also have to be a business person, as they need to know how, when and where to market their talents, and also how to save, spend and invest their income. That is really true. I'd really love to make a video on this actually, about how I love what I do, and I'm a performer and a singer and a songwriter, but I'm also like a manager and my own record label and my own accountant. I'm my own PR person, social media manager. Like, there is a lot that goes into being an independent artist. Yeah, it's exhausting. And like the money I've made from busking, it pays my rent and it pays my bills and my travel, but it also pays for all of my recordings and all my equipment and everything like that. So everything kind of gets reinvested back into the business. So there is like definitely a business head that you have to have for being a full-time busker. And speaking of Lucy May Walker, this is something I love to talk about. Lucy May Walker says, without fail, the assumption I always get is that we don't pay our taxes. And since having the card reader, people are like, oh, you're gonna have to declare that now. I'm like, babes, if anything, it's much easier now than depositing coins at the bank like I normally do. 100%. It's a real go-to for people. I think the fact that we get paid cash in hand, we must not pay our taxes. And yeah, the card reader, actually, a lot of people are like, oh, you'll have to declare that if it goes straight into your account. I'm like, yeah, it's so much easier because I don't have to carry a big heavy bag of coins to the bank. It just goes straight into my bank account. It's bliss. Yeah, it's so funny how people think that we just assume that we wouldn't pay tax. It really makes me question how the honesty of other people, because they're like, if I made my income in cash, I wouldn't declare it. Like, but what about hospitals and schools and like roads and stuff? Paying tax is like a way of life. I guess not if you're Amazon. Ryan says, I always thought instantly forgettable until I passed you over 8 years ago near the London Eye. Wow, Ryan, 8 years! Oh my goodness, wow, that was like when I first started. Your voice made me stop and listen, and because of you, a new appreciation. Oh, thank you so much, Ryan. That is so lovely. The real beauty of busking for me is that people can engage with what I'm doing and take a card and remember me. And like, Ryan, for 8 years, wow. Owen Lane says, get a job. Which sounds horrible, but Owen is a fellow busker, so I'll let you off. Owen is a fantastic magician. When I did the promo for iZettle, I had a lot of comments of people saying get a job, and I was like, I have a job. I go to a place, I do my work, and I get paid for it. Some people think that the only way that you can have a job is if you hate your job. And then that's the only thing that, it doesn't count as a job. If you're having a nice time, it's not a job. Chris says, I always assume that when buskers are out in the streets, they're looking for the break when a record producer will pass them by and hear them. I think I did cover this in my previous video, but for a long time I really wanted a big break. That's why I was busking, was to hopefully someone who worked at a record label might walk past, or you know, someone important might walk past. That has been true in its own way. It's just, it wasn't a record label, it was just a lot of people who care a lot about my music, and enough of those people have meant that I can make it my living. So, you know, important people were walking past all the time. They were just normal people who connected with my music and made it possible for me to make a living, and I'm so grateful for that. Alan says, I never took much notice of buskers, though I'd always throw them £1 in support. To me, they were just average musicians who sang other people's songs. Then about 6 years ago, I saw, 6 years? You guys have been watching me for ages, I love this. I saw Charlotte Campbell on the South Bank, and that changed my whole perception. I was soon watching other talented musicians busking like Lucy May Walker, Jasmino, and bands like Belle and the Busker. Charlotte changed my life and entire attitude towards buskers. Oh, thank you, Alan, that's so lovely. Miguel says, I first saw you busking at the South Bank on the 23rd of December 2017. Oh, that's a really special date for me, Miguel, so I'm really glad that's the day you saw me. I remember it quite distinctly because I was set to spend Christmas away from my family at the time. I thought that the music you played was absolutely lovely. I also thought you were so bubbly. Thanks. On a serious note, when I saw you at the South Bank, I also thought, wow, it must be hard playing guitar during the winter time, even if you have gloves on. Yeah, oh my goodness, the cold. I busk full time all year round, so no matter the weather, I am out. And yeah, during the winter, my hands get really cold. I have fingerless gloves, and I've actually designed my own gloves because there are certain fingers that you don't actually need. So like, I only need these 2 fingers to hold a plectrum. I can't hold a plectrum with gloves on, I've tried, it just slips out. I took gloves and I cut the ends off these 2 fingers, so it's still got fingers there, but then these bits are fingerless. They're really weird gloves. They're like fingerless, except for my thumb and my little finger on this hand, and these 3 on that hand. I don't think they're a pair of gloves that I should be able to find anywhere. They're specially designed by me. So maybe I should start my own brand. All right, this is the last one. This is from Mark, Kelly, and Jake. We think buskers and street artists play an important role because of the crowds they pull and entertainment they provide, as well as a boost to local economy. That is such a great way to think of buskers, and I'm so glad, because obviously I think that we play an important role, because I like to think of myself as important. I get some really lovely comments about buskers and what they do for people's mental health. You know, if you're just passing by and you're having a bad day and then suddenly someone's playing your favourite song, that can be a real lift. And I know that in that sense we are important, but we're often made to feel like we're not that important, that, you know, we're more of a nuisance. Yeah, and actually, so while we're on this, I didn't actually plan to talk about this, but I am just going to say one quick thing, that they are trying to ban amplification and bring in a really strict and unfair licensing system in Westminster, and a lot of pitches will be affected. Covent Garden will be affected, Trafalgar Square, Leicester Square. So I'm going to be putting a link to a petition in the description. If you could help us out by giving that a little sign, just because obviously they're not areas that I usually busk in. I usually play along the South Bank, but they affect a lot of my friends. Banning amplification really brings down the quality of what performers can do. Like, personally, I wouldn't couldn't busk without an amplifier. My music is quite soft, and what I do is quite, like, you know, gentle, and I need amplification in order to create the atmosphere that I do. So if amplification were to be banned on the South Bank, I'm not sure that I would be able to continue my career as a busker. And the fact that they're bringing it in Westminster is a really scary thing, because it is something that may be able to creep across the rest of London, and it's not something that I want for my fellow buskers. It's something I want to stand with them against. So if you could give us a hand and sign the petition below, because at the moment they're not considering buskers in the same way that a lot of you do. They don't think of us as a boost to the economy. They don't think of us as a lift to people's personal and mental health. They just think of us as a nuisance, and I'd really, really like to stand against it. So please help us out giving that a sign. Thank you so much for all your assumptions. You are fabulous. I love you all, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.
Chatty Wednesdays with me.